Story 1. The Vanishing Shaft. This happened just a few weeks ago. I'm a junior in college, and I grew up in New Mexico. There's not a whole lot to do in the small desert town I'm from. So ever since high school, my friends and I have been into exploring weird forgotten places. You know the kind: abandoned diners, out on the highway, shuttered motels, old service tunnels. Anything that felt like it had a history too. If guy who always found the spots was Eric. He was quiet and kind of obsessive. In a way, sometimes I wondered how he even discovered the places he brought us to, like he'd show up with grainy screenshots from old forums, or dead Instagram accounts that hadn't posted in years, and somehow he'd track them down. The last one he sent us was a single blurry photo captioned "Only with hidden minds outside of Tucson. You'll hear them before you find them." So that Saturday it was me, Eric, and my other buddy Dylan. I had an old Ford Bronco that was perfect for dirt trails, so I drove. We didn't have an exact address, just a drop pin way out in the Sonoran Desert. We left town before sunrise, and the deeper we drove, the more empty. It got no buildings, no signs, no fences, just open sand and rock for miles. We'd lost service almost an hour earlier. The only thing guiding us was the downloaded map. Eric had saved it. After what felt like forever, Dylan started getting pissed, swearing we were wasting gas and chasing after a scam. Eric just sat there quietly staring at his phone, insisting we were close. I was just about ready to turn back when Dylan leaned forward and pointed out something off in the distance. A half-collapsed wooden frame sticking out of a slope, old beams blackened and rotting, leaning over the entrance of what was unmistakably a mineshaft. Standing in front of it, I could feel cold air drifting out of the black hole in the earth. And it didn't make sense. It was over 90 degrees out, but that air felt like standing in front of an open freezer. Eric pulled out his phone, marked the location, then turned to us and finally said something. His exact words were, "Do you hear that?" At first I thought he was joking, but then I really listened, and I swear from somewhere deep inside that shaft I heard it too. Faint scraping sounds like metal dragging against stone. Slow, steady, like something moving way down there. Gird up, and Eric had even brought cheap respirator masks for the dust. The incline was steep, but not vertical. Beams lined the walls like broken ribs, and every few steps the wood creaked under our weight. It was darker than I expected, pitch black, only broken by the cones of light from our flashlight seat. Deeper we went, the more unnatural it felt. It wasn't just the cold air anymore, it was the silence. Our footsteps echoed too sharp, too loud, like the mine was swallowing every other sound. Eventually, we reached a fork, 3 tunnels branching off in different directions. Eric didn't hesitate. He picked the one on the left. Dylan muttered something about him being insane, but followed anyway. I brought up the rear. Halfway down the tunnel, we stopped dead because of what we saw carved into the dirt wall were long, deep scratches, like someone had dragged something massive through there, not once, but over and over. The grooves were uneven, some higher than my head, some scraping low near the floor. Eric knelt down, touched one of the grooves and whispered, "Fresh." We kept walking because for some reason turning back felt worse than pushing forward. And then we found something none of us were ready for: an old helmet lying in the dirt, cracked wide open like it had been crushed from the inside. And next to it were bones, not fossils, not animal bones, but human ribcage fragments, and a femur half buried in dust. Dylan cursed under his breath, but before he could say anything else, the scraping sound started again, this time much closer. Killed our flashlights immediately. The darkness was suffocating. I couldn't even see my own hand, but I could hear it: metal dragging on stone, slow, deliberate, getting closer every second. Then came something worse, a low breath, not human, deep and wet like air being pulled through water. And right after that, the sound of knuckles cracking one by one, echoing down the tunneled lane. Panicked, flicked his flashlight back on, and for a split second, at the very edge of the beam, I swear we all saw it. A figure hunched low, its limbs too long for its body, its face obscured, but the reflection of 2 eyes caught the light, glowing faintly, white bolted. We didn't even try to be quiet, stumbling over rocks, scraping against the walls. I could hear it behind us moving fast, faster than it should have been. Eric screamed at us to keep going, and I swear it was right on his heels when we reached the fork. We didn't think, we just scrambled up the incline toward the surface. My lungs felt like they were going to tear open from running so hard. The sound of claws on stone echoed behind us, closer and closer, burst out into the daylight. Gasping, Eric was the last one out, and for a moment, he just stood at the entrance, staring back into the dark before finally backing away. Didn't stop running until we got back to the Bronco. Dylan jumped in the passenger seat. I slammed the gas and didn't look back until we were miles away. Entire drive back, no one spoke, not a word. All I could hear was my own heartbeat in my ears. Days later, Eric convinced us to go back just to the entrance during daylight. He said he'd dropped his knife inside and wanted to at least check the outside area. We drove out reluctantly, but when we got there, the mineshaft was gone. Don't mean caved in or blocked. I mean there was nothing, just flat desert slope. No beams, no entrance, no sign anything had ever been there. Eric swore we weren't in the wrong place. He even showed us the pin on his phone, but where he dropped the marker was just sand and stanu. Turned to leave, but that's when I noticed something half buried in the dirt. A helmet cracked wide open, covered in fresh grooves like something had clawed through it. Don't know what we saw that day, but I do know this. There are places in the desert that appear and vanish on their own, places that don't want to be found, and whatever was in that mine, it didn't stay buried. Story 2. The fire in the desert. I've always been more of a nature guy than a city guy. I grew up in Colorado, so weekends for me were fishing trips, camping in the mountains, hiking trails that never seemed to end. When I started dating Hannah, one of the first things that clicked between us was how much she loved the outdoors too. She wasn't into fancy resorts or packed beaches. She liked the quiet, the stillness, the kind of silence you only find far away from anyone else. So when she suggested we try camping out in the desert, I thought it sounded perfect. Neither of us had really done that before. Forests and lakes, sure, but not the open emptiness of the desert. The appeal was obvious: clear skies, no light pollution, and stars so bright they looked like you could touch them. I drove out to a spot in Utah, about 4 hours from Salt Lake. It wasn't an official campground, more like a dispersed camping area, just public land, where you're allowed to set up a tent and start a fire. No rangers, no amenities, no people, just miles of dirt and rock. Got there late afternoon, set up the tent, gathered some brush for the fire, and cooked a quick dinner. By the time the sun set, the desert went silent, the kind of silence that feels almost too big, like the air itself is holding its breath. First night was perfect. We sat by the fire, drank a couple beers, shared a joint, and just talked about dumb stuff. We lay back on the hood of my truck and watched the Milky Way stretch across the sky. It felt unreal, the kind of moment you don't want to end. But then came the sound. Both of us heard it, not close, but somewhere out in the distance, a low drawn-out moan or howl. It wasn't a coyote. I've heard coyotes plenty of times. This was different, deeper, longer. Hannah looked at me with wide eyes, and I nodded. Yeah, I heard it too. We laughed it off eventually, said it was probably some desert animal. Second night, same thing, same time, just past midnight. We heard it again, that same mournful sound carrying across the empty land. I tried to joke it away, maybe a donkey, maybe wind funneling through rocks. Hannah laughed, but it didn't feel funny, not reality. Went to sleep, but I noticed Hannah stayed curled up against me the whole night, something she didn't normally do. She's usually a sweaty flirt. Third night is when things got bad. I woke up sometime around 2 a.m. At first I didn't know why, but then I heard it, footsteps outside the tent, soft, slow crunches, like someone walking carefully over the dry, dirty froze. I didn't want to wake Hannah. Not yet. I just listened. The steps circled once, then stopped, just a few feet away, and then came the sound I'll never forget, the flick of a lighter, followed by a tiny orange glow shining right through the thin tent, while Simona was standing just feet from us holding a flame steady. then waving it back and forth slowly, like they were letting us know they were there. The glow grew brighter then, flared up like they had lit something bigger, maybe a torch. Then without warning, it dropped with a dull thud, and instantly the tent wall glowed. Orange fire heat surged around us. The fabric caught in seconds. Hannah screamed. I grabbed her, and we scrambled out, barely managing to throw some gear away from the flames. She grabbed a jug of water and poured it over the side, trying to smother the fire. I stomped at the edges with my boots until my lungs burned from the smoke. You got it out, but half the tent was gone, scorched black and melted into the dirt. I snatched the flashlight and scanned around frantically. Whoever was out there was gone. Not a single footprint, not a shadow, just empty desert stretching in every direction on it. Hands were shaking so bad she could barely pack. I told her we were leaving right then. We grabbed what we could and started moving fast toward where we thought the truck was parked, but in the dark everything looked the same. 10 minutes into walking, we realized we were lost. The truck wasn't anywhere we thought it would be, and that's when it started to scream. The exact same one we'd heard the first 2 nights, except now it wasn't distant, it was close to close. It went on and on, rising and falling like something in pain, and then another one answered from somewhere else, and then another soon. The whole desert around us felt alive with these howls, overlapping, echoing until I couldn't tell how many there were. Hannah clutched my arm, whispering that she saw something moving between the dunes. I swung the flashlight, but caught nothing. Still, we ran. We didn't care about direction anymore. We just needed to move. By some miracle, we stumbled straight into the truck. My hands fumbled with the keys, but it started on the first try. I floored it, bouncing down the dirt road, while Hannah sobbed beside Meth. Screams didn't fade right away. They chased us, echoing against the hills for miles, until finally, when we hit pavement, silence fell. Again, I didn't stop driving. Until dawn, I pulled into a diner off the highway. Hannah refused to even get out. She just sat there shaking. I called the local sheriff's office, told them what happened. They said they'd send someone out to check the site, but I knew in my gut they wouldn't find anything. 2 days later, I went back to grab the gear we left behind, but when I reached the spot where we'd camped, it didn't look the same. The ground was blackened, sure, but there were no remains of our burned tent, no melted fabric, no charred poles, just a perfect circle of ash, and in the middle of it, lying half buried in dirt, was a single matchstick, unburnt, pristine, like it had just been pulled from a boxy. Don't know who or what was out there, but every time I hear a coyote at night, now my stomach knots, because I can't help wondering if one night it'll be that same scream again. Story 3. The family on Route 191. This happened in Arizona back in 2019. I was driving south on Route 191 through Apache County. I had just finished visiting family in Colorado and was making the long trip back to Tucson alone. It's not a drive I'd recommend at night. It's endless stretches of desert highway, no lights, no towns, just black road and darker sky. Be around midnight. I was running on caffeine and static radio stations when I saw them, a family of 4 walking along the shoulder. 2 adults and 2 kids, barefoot in the dirt. The father was holding a lantern instead of a flashlight, its glow swaying back and forth. He slowed down instinctively, but something felt off. The family was dressed wrong for the desert. The man wore a button-down shirt buttoned all the way to his throat. The woman had on what looked like a Sunday dress, and the kids, both in pajamas, thin white cotton, hanging loose, their feet dragging in the sandy. Rolled the window down and called out, asked if they needed help. The father turned his head toward me slowly, and I swear his face didn't catch the lantern light. It was in shadow, even though the glow was right beneath it. Against my better judgment, I pulled over a few feet ahead. The woman approached, first holding the kids by their hands. She smiled, but it wasn't relief. It was stiff, like a rehearsed expression. She said their car had broken down farther back, and they just needed a ride to the nearest gas station. He hesitated, but nodded, told them I could take them part way. I opened the back door. The kids climbed in without a word, sitting too still, their eyes fixed on the floorboard. Father got into the passenger seat, set the lantern on his lap, The glow filled the cab, but he still looked dim, as if the light bent around him. I tried small talk, asked where they were headed. He said, south. Nothing more, just that single word. His voice was dry, cracked like someone who hadn't spoken in days. Mother kept humming in the back a tune I recognized, but couldn't place at first. It was Rockabye Baby. Slow off-key, and endless drove for about 20 minutes. The only sound her humming and the faint rattling of the lantern. Then the kids spoke for the first time. In perfect unison, they asked, "Are we there yet?" I glanced in the rear view mirror and my stomach dropped. Their mouths were moving, but their eyes weren't blinking. Not once, not in 20 minutes. Their gaze locked straight ahead. He told them we'd reach a station soon, but the father shook his head slowly, said no stations out here, not anymore. Then he leaned closer, his face finally catching the lantern glow, and I wished it hadn't. His skin looked dry, cracked, like desert clay splitting apart. His eyes sunken dark like two pits. He pressed harder on the gas, muttering that I'd find somewhere. Anywhere. 5 minutes later, the lantern flickered, the mother stopped humming, and suddenly, both kids turned their heads to me, their voices layered, overlapping. "You should not have stopped." The lantern blew out, the cab went dark. I swerved, nearly driving off the highway, fumbling for my phone flashlight, when the glow came back on by itself. But the seats were empty, the family gone, just the faint smell of burnt matches lingering in the air. He slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. I threw open the doors, scanned the road. Nothing, no footprints, no figures, just desert stretching forever behind Melwyn. I got back in my truck. The passenger seat was wet, like someone had been sitting there, dripping water onto the upholstery. Except when I touched it, my fingers came back streaked with something black, like ash mixed with oily. Didn't stop driving until I reached Street John's. Hours later, I pulled into a gas station, collapsed onto the hood of my truck, shaking. The attendant asked if I was okay. I almost told him everything, but stopped when I glanced at the TV in the corner of the store playing local news headline. Read: family of 4 found dead after crash on Route 191. Their car had been discovered, burned out on the side of the road just 2 nights earlier. A father, mother, and 2 children, authorities said. The fire had been so intense, none of the bodies were intact enough to identify without dental records. Drove past that stretch of 191 last month during daylight. I told myself I was being dramatic, that exhaustion and caffeine had made me hallucinate, but as I passed mile marker 232, my truck stuttered, the radio cut out, and for just a second in the mirror, I saw them all walking along the shoulder again. The lantern swaying back and forth. This time, I didn't slow down. I pressed the gas and kept my eyes forward, but even now when I drive desert highways, I keep expecting to see them waiting barefoot on the roadside.